Hey, how's it going? It's Sean Bradshaw from cyberfret.com, and in this lesson we're going to go over some basic ways to play a G. And often as a beginning guitar player you encounter kind of a few ways that you see a G in some different chord books. So which one should you do? And it really depends on the situation. So we're just going to cover really three basic fingerings that you find for a G chord and when you should use each one. So the three kind of basic fingerings for a G would be like this, where I'm using my third finger on the sixth string at the third fret, second finger on the fifth string at the second fret, and pinky on the first string at the third fret. Another common way that you might see G is those exact notes, but using your first, second, and third fingers. And kind of the third way that you see a basic G is actually using four different notes. And all I'm doing is from this G, moving my third finger to the second string and my pinky to the first string. So these all have their place in some way, but I'm just going to kind of go through each one and kind of describe when you might use each one. So when I'm first teaching beginners, really the one that I teach first is using your second, third, and fourth fingers like this. And what happens is one of the most common kind of chord progressions in so many different songs is going from a G chord to a C chord. And if you look between these two chords, you kind of have a common shape. Guitar is a very visual instrument. We see different shapes that we're playing. And so what happens is the second and third fingers have a common shape between the C and the G chord if you're using this fingering of a G chord. And so if I'm on this G to go to C, all I have to do is let go of my pinky, move my second and third fingers one set of strings towards the floor, and put my first finger on the second string at the first fret, and that is a C chord. And so making that transition ends up being very smooth. Now, in a lot of different chord books, you see that other version or that other fingering of these exact same notes using the first, second, and third fingers. And what happens is it's not wrong, but if I'm going to be going between a G chord and a C chord in this case, I have to completely switch around my fingers. It's just, in my opinion, far too much work. But you know, you find this in a lot of chord books, and so you know, a lot of people learn the G chord. In fact, it may be a little bit easier for some people to play that. You know, one of the things about this version where it uses your pinky is it uses your pinky, and a lot of times people shy away from things with their pinky because your pinky is your weakest finger. You know, the trick to this chord is where most people have trouble is they're stretching down like this and trying to do this. The real trick is to keep this part of your hand very close to the bottom of the neck, all right? And your pinky curves way over, and also your pinky doesn't need to try to stay right next to the fret bar. It's okay if it's back a little bit. So you also see how my fingers are angled a little bit here as well. So where most people go wrong is, again, they're trying to stretch their pinky right next to the fret bar and keep their hand down like this, and you know, that's kind of painful. So it's okay to keep your thumb up a little bit. Just bring this part of your palm closer to the bottom. And there's also a lot of other things that you can end up doing if you use this particular G. Another common chord change is going from a G to a G7 to a C. And if you're playing the G chord like this, transitioning to a G7 chord, which is just letting go of your pinky and putting your first finger on the first fret of the first string, it's a very easy transition. If I have to go G, G7, again, that's just far too much to travel, in my opinion. So, you know, this particular G, where in teaching private students, when I've kind of given up on this and gone to this, is sometimes when somebody has arthritis, especially in their pinky, and they can't bend it over. And so, you know, this is most certainly an option, but I would definitely try the second, third, and fourth fingers, even if it's a little bit more difficult at first. And then the third kind of way of playing the G is the four fingers. And you might think, well, Sean, isn't that just as awkward to go from C to this G? And the answer is yes. So you don't use this chord when going from a G to a C, but you do when you're going from a G to a C add 9. All right, so this is very common when you're doing this. All right, because we can keep your third and fourth fingers down. This is a very common chord progression. So it gives us the sound of a G going to a C, but a little bit fancier. Even going to a D chord, I can just keep my third finger down like this. So maybe if a song is just G and D, you can see I can just keep that consistent third finger down for those. Or if I'm going, you know, those common chords, my third finger didn't leave that D note, third fret on the second string. So there's actually a lot of ways you could play a G chord. I'm just talking about kind of the basic cowboy chords right here. A G chord is made up of the notes G, B, and D, and anywhere on the neck you can play those three notes, you have a G chord. I could, you know, I could put out a chord book that is nothing but different ways to play a G chord. And so, but when you're first learning, you often learn these basic cowboy chords that have some open strings in them, and then you might learn some, you know, bar chords, and those are kind of your basic starting point chords. But go ahead and, you know, play around with all three of these chords, but especially think about the one that's your second, third, and fourth fingers for the G, and then that four-note version where you're using all four of your fingers. And practicing the switch between G and C for the one with the second, third, and fourth, and practicing going to C add 9 with the four-finger version. All right, have a good one.